This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
Need a laptop that's built to perform and designed to last all day? Select Windows 11 PCs starting at $499.99 are now at Best Buy. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Cocktails up here feel just right. Is Cambria amazing? All right. Bring a date, your team, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com. See you on the roof.
I think it's a game changer.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was one of the first global leaders to not only react to Donald Trump's MOU with Iran to end hostilities, but he's been praising it, and he's done it more than once.
I think, as I said in recent days, that I welcome the deal that President Trump has negotiated.
Hello, and welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host, and today a look at what this deal is, the good, the bad, and the mostly ugly of it all, and what it means in particular for a country that started this conflict with Iran as a close ally of the United States and is now seemingly on the outside. I'm speaking, of course, of Israel, where this deal isn't popular.
Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world.
That was Vice President J.D. Vance, and Vance isn't the only one sending warning messages to the Israeli government and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu through the media.
If it weren't for Donald Trump, and Bibi Netanyahu worked well with me, but he will tell you, we're the ones with the guns, we're the ones with the whole deal, we're the ones with the B-2 bombers, etc. If it weren't for Donald Trump, Israel would have been eviscerated.
Joining us from Tel Aviv to try and break this down, talk about it, is Eylon Levy. He is a former spokesperson for the Israeli government and keen political observer. So, Eylon, between Donald Trump's words that he has to keep Netanyahu sane, that Israel will do whatever he tells them, J.D. Vance essentially saying, look, you're ungrateful, why, and you wouldn't exist without us. How is this all being received in Israel today?
Look, we need to understand what the American administration is doing now, because the president and the vice president are not armchair commentators. They're trying to drive a particular agenda. Donald Trump wants a grand bargain with Iran. He concluded that he didn't want to force the Strait of Hormuz open using military action, and therefore he was going to pay the Iranians to open it. I mean, that is the meaning of unfreezing assets, allowing them to sell oil, allowing them to charge a toll on the Strait of Hormuz. This is a deal to reopen that strait. And to that end, the president's decided that Israel's defensive campaign against Hezbollah in Lebanon is a nuisance. It is an obstacle in the path of a grand bargain with the Islamic Republic of Iran, because he wants this problem to go away, definitely ahead of the midterms. And that means that whereas throughout the war, the Israeli and American interests were completely intertwined to the level that you had American jets refueling Israeli planes over the skies of Tehran, they've become undone. America has a lot more risk tolerance for the Islamic Republic of Iran than Israel, which is literally on the border of Lebanon, southern Lebanon, controlled by an Iranian proxy army, Hezbollah. Much more skeptical of the Iranian regime's intentions, by the way, as are many in the administration who we haven't heard from exactly supporting this deal. And so it does look like Donald Trump is now trying to publicly put pressure on Netanyahu to wrap up what's going on in Lebanon so that it doesn't get in the way of the grand rapprochement he's trying to achieve with the Islamic Republic of Iran.
You've got op-eds in Israeli publications owned by prominent Trump donors denouncing the deal. Clearly, there's a lot of Israeli public that is upset with this, although I did note that Amir Tirbon in Haaretz is saying, well, here's what we have to understand about Trump, and almost defending him. Is there a split going on with the public within the political sphere?
No, pretty much everyone in Israel understands that this deal is a disaster, not only for Israel, but for the Middle East and, frankly, for the United States. And that's because this is not a deal to end Iran's nuclear program. It is a deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz while giving away America's leverage to end the nuclear program. What are the Americans getting? A promise to negotiate an end to the nuclear program. What are they giving? Oil waivers, unfreezing sanctions, giving immunity to Hezbollah in Lebanon, and a promise to undo all the other sanctions as well. This is seen in Israel, as it is by many of the president's critics in Congress, as a capitulation to the Islamic Republic of Iran. So there is a lot of anger and frustration in Israel, which is explained really by the fact that the United States and Israel have been such close allies. Israelis are in such awe of the really brave steps that this administration took to take on the Islamic Republic of Iran, both Operation Midnight Hammer and Operation Epic Fury. They're so in awe of what America did, they're so grateful for everything America did, that they're shocked in equal measure that America is willing to give away its leverage just to reopen the Straits of Hormuz because of domestic political pressure. There really isn't anyone in Israel who thinks that this deal that reopens the Strait of Hormuz by giving away America's leverage to end the nuclear program makes this region safer, although, as you say, political commentators understand the political reasons for which the administration has had to do it.
Do you put any stock in some writers putting forward that, well, this is just Trump playing 5D chess, and really there's going to be something else that comes out later, and then they will strike again, and Iran will fall, and the regime will fall? To me, I read the arguments, I'll listen to them, but as you have said, I agree, this to me is about the midterms. And I said at the start of this, if the war drags on, this will drop the bottom out of Donald Trump's support. There is some growing anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli sentiment on the right, as there has always been, just as there is on the left. Both parties are infected by it. But bigger than that right now is we don't want a forever war. And anything longer than a couple of weeks, people start describing or treating as a forever war. They didn't seem to have a plan to get out of it. So do you put any stock in the folks that say this isn't about the midterms, Trump is playing 5D chess?
This deal is a recipe for a forever war because it gives the Iranian regime billions of dollars that they're going to pour into their proxy armies, into their ballistic missiles, perhaps into their nuclear program, definitely not into the Iranian people they were massacring in the streets until President Trump promised that help is on its way.
But J.D. Vance is saying, no, that won't happen because we know and can watch how they're spending their money this time.
Yeah, so go to the MOU, hit on the keyboard Control F, and immediately, and you will see that the United States has agreed to has agreed to sign oil waivers immediately, to unfreeze sanctions during negotiations, to force an end of the conflict in Lebanon, and all of that is preconditions for negotiations to even begin on the nuclear issue. The Americans are not playing 5D chess unless that involves unfreezing massive amounts of money for the Iranian regime, and then in which case that's 6D chess. The Iranians are playing 5D chess because what they're trying to do is to deliberately drive a wedge between Israel and the United States. The Iranian regime knows that the only combined power in the world that can stop them from getting nuclear weapons is the combined might of the U.S. military and Israel, the two most powerful air forces in the world, according to the Department of War in the United States. Okay? So they're trying to drive a wedge between Israel and the United States. How are they doing that? By activating their proxy army Hezbollah in Lebanon. If Hezbollah keeps killing Israeli soldiers, we woke up this morning to news of 4 men who were killed in battle. If they keep shooting drones and rockets at Israeli houses and force Israel to respond, they're going to incur the wrath of President Trump, who's going to try to tell Israel, listen, we're not on the same page about Lebanon because I really want to get a deal with the Islamic Republic. So they're dangling the promise of nuclear talks in front of the United States in order to tempt the United States into rebuking Israel and forcing it to accept Hezbollah on its borders. And there is frustration in Israel, frustration in Lebanon, that this is a deal that essentially sells Lebanon back to the IRGC. Lebanon is a sovereign country. It wants to represent itself at the negotiating table. It doesn't want the Islamic regime Iran to represent it at the negotiating table. Israel's a sovereign country that can also decide its own affairs. And any progress on that front should be decided between Israel and Lebanon directly. But the Iranian regime is inserting itself here, demanding a veto over what happens in Lebanon to strengthen its stranglehold on that country in order to drive a wedge between Israel and the United States. It knows if it can drive those two countries apart, that will clear the path for it to race towards nuclear weapons again in future.
The biggest disappointment for me in this MOU, among many disappointments, it's a very disappointing deal, but the biggest one is that there was nothing about the proxy groups, not about the Houthis, not about the Shia militias in Iraq, not about Hamas, and not about Hezbollah. So this will, you mentioned forever war. Those are the forever wars. Iran, I think Marco Rubio gets this, and that's why he says all problems in the Middle East trace back to Iran, and sounds still sensible on this when he isn't defending the deal. But Iran is led by a messianic cult of 12ers who believe that they can speed up the end times. If the United States were led by an evangelical Christian who was trying to speed up the end times, the New York Times would be constantly harping on about it. They would be warning about it. We don't get that same warning about Iran. But that is where they're coming from on this. So why do we trust them? That they will enter nuclear talks, that they will participate, that they will be honest?
Frankly, I don't know whether the administration expects Iran to negotiate in good faith. Definitely, that's the assessment of the CIA, according to Axios, that the Iranians do not intend to wrap up the nuclear program. And Israeli intelligence believes that they're going to use this 60-day window in order to, frankly, whenever the Iranians say that the 60-day window has begun, because as far as they're concerned, America hasn't fulfilled its side of the bargain just yet, but they will use that window in order to continue reconstituting their nuclear program. This is a regime that, as Secretary Rubio said at the beginning of the war, is governed by religious lunatics. They're not playing by the same rules of the game as normal countries. It is a revolution that has hijacked a country that treats its people with appalling brutality, that wants to export chaos all across the region. And any deal that unleashes billions of dollars to this radical lunatic regime will create forever wars, because the Iranian regime is going to pour that money into its proxy armies in order to sow chaos. And these proxy armies are not just a threat to Israel. When we talk about proxy armies, it's not just Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, who can also blockade the Red Sea. We're talking about militias in Iraq that were responsible for drone attacks against Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries during the war. Okay, not all the attacks on the Gulf countries came from mainland Iran. They activated their proxy armies in these countries as well. And so it really does beg a belief that the administration is releasing all of this money to the Iranian regime in order to conditionally open the Strait of Hormuz. They're still going to be charging money in total violation of international law in order to open the Strait of Hormuz. But it doesn't deal with the nuclear program. It doesn't deal with the ballistic missiles. It doesn't deal with the proxy armies. In fact, it makes all three of those problems worse just for the sake of reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which is, of course, important, but the U.S. did have other options.
So I want to ask you about the response from the leaders of other countries. We'll pick on the leaders of Canada. Mark Carney has come out and said that this deal was worth it. He has praised the deal. He's now said the war was worth it. He had previously, at the beginning, said, well, we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. Then he was critical of the war, called for it to end. And then he puts out a statement along with his counterparts in the UK, Italy, France, Germany, talking about the need for greater stability. How much does it disappoint you that the driving force for their point of view isn't stopping the biggest exporter of terror? And we've just found out that the shooting at the American consulate, the shooting up of several synagogues in Toronto, was carried out by people who were being coordinated by the Iranian regime. A man who's since been arrested by the United States. A police officer died trying to execute the search warrants to bring those in. The massive spike in car thefts in Canada is driven by organized crime working with Hezbollah to fund them, because the cars are stolen, they're shipped through the port of Montreal to overseas, they're sold for money that is laundered and helps pay for Hezbollah. There's lots of things hitting Canada, just like all these tentacles go out into the UK, Italy, France, and Germany as well. And yet their leaders come out with a statement praising this deal because it brings regional stability.
Canada's support for appeasement here is not surprising, but it's definitely disappointing, because appeasement doesn't buy peace, it only buys you dishonor and lays the groundwork for the next war. This will offer temporary relief. It is short-sighted. If you are a politician and all you care about is bringing oil prices down, sure. But what is the cost of doing that? The cost is emboldening a terrorist regime that has brought political violence into Canada itself, that is orchestrating organized crime in order to take its illicit profits and sow terrorism around the world. It's in order to build an architecture that can impose illegal tolls on the Strait of Hormuz, and seeing Canada, which purports to support international law, praising an agreement that allows the Iranian regime to place illegal tolls on the Strait of Hormuz is truly astonishing. It is incredibly short-sighted because it ignores how the Iranian regime is going to take those ill-gotten gains and continue to sow instability and chaos. The idea that radical regimes can be funded into moderation, and if you throw enough money at them, they're craven enough that they will moderate, is extremely short-sighted, extremely dangerous. But if you're surrounded by ocean on either side, perhaps it makes it more difficult to see the immediate threat, which countries in the Middle East here are definitely seeing.
But, in fairness, Eylon, 2 weeks ago, oil was over $90 a barrel, and today, West Texas Intermediate is trading at $76. So victory.
Look, the spike in oil prices was an unintended consequence of this war. And bringing oil prices down is important. Everyone's feeling that pain in their pockets. But this war is about so much more than the price of oil, because this sets a precedent that the Iranian regime gets a chokehold over a vital international waterway. And other actors are going to be looking around the world thinking, how can we take over vital waterways and impose charges and taxes and our own blockades, because America, push comes to shove, is going to back down. And so we don't end up buying stability. We're not getting the Western-led international order. We're getting institutionalized, legalized piracy by a lunatic regime that realized it can blackmail the world by closing the Strait of Hormuz. And believe me, the Iranian regime will do it again. The Iranian regime will blockade the Strait of Hormuz again because they know it is a pressure tactic they can get away with. And if they want to put pressure on whatever government for whatever reason, they can take the global economy hostage because they know the United States and the rest of the West will not see through the military option till the end and will try to blackmail it, will try to bribe it into reopening the Strait of Hormuz. So, okay, you brought oil prices down for now, but you've jeopardized them in the long run while pumping a terrorist pirate regime full of oodles and crates and barrels full of cash.
And that's one of the reasons this might actually be worse than Obama's deal, which
Oh,
was
it's
horrific to
much
say the
worse than
least.
Obama's deal. It's and that's
Obama's deal was horrible.
And that's what's astonishing about it, because President Trump was the number one advocate against the Obama deal. He understood the problem was if you put temporary restrictions on the nuclear program and release huge amounts of cash, by the time the deal expires, the Iranian regime will be so powerful that there is no military option on the table, and therefore you can't renegotiate it. And we saw how they took the Obama money and poured it straight into the proxy armies, creating the combined invasion force that threatened us in Israel on October 7th. But at least that deal put real caps on the Iranian nuclear program before they started undoing sanctions. This plan immediately allows the Iranians to export oil, immediately unfreezes their assets, even before Iran does anything in order to dismantle the nuclear program. That's just stage one to begin negotiations on the nuclear program.
Let me ask you about Israel's relations with outside countries, and specifically about Washington going forward, because one of the things that J.D. Vance said that is correct, may be uncomfortable to hear, and he definitely is, let's just say he has a different view on Israel than Republicans traditionally have had for the last while. But Israel is running out of allies. People like Mark Carney, not a friend or ally of Israel. Not a lot of friends or allies in Europe, and there used to be. And in the United States, Biden wasn't great, but he was a lot better than what you're going to get from the next Democrat. And Donald Trump could be the last pro-Israel Republican president. Israel's finding itself in a really awkward and difficult political decision. Is this changing global dynamics around Israel? Is it Netanyahu driving other people away? Or is it, as Melanie Joly, one of the cabinet ministers in Carney's government, said a while back, it's about demographics. Have you seen the demographics in my riding? She said one time, alluding to the fact that she has a lot of Muslim voters. What's happening, and where does Israel go from here? Does Netanyahu survive? Is he able to mend fences?
After the October 7th massacre, Israelis, I think, naively believed that the whole world would be with us. Israelis said, Hamas invaded, slaughtered 1,200 people in the most sadistic, barbaric ways imaginable, kidnapped 251 people, including children, into Gaza, including women and men to be used as sex slaves, including dead bodies to be used as bargaining chips. The whole world saw this, and they will stand with us now as we fight against the Iranian Axis. And that was naive, because they underestimated the combined force of the massive disinformation war that has been waged against Israel by activist groups, by Hamas within Gaza, by UN agencies that have been hijacked by radical actors to use this war to delegitimize Israel. And there's a reason that the first placards accusing Israel of genocide came out on October 8th immediately. This was all pre-planned and coordinated in advance. So the souring of relations with our allies has definitely been painful for Israelis to watch, because they're asking, what on earth would you do if the same happened to your country? If a terrorist army invaded, snatched children from their beds, dragged them into tunnels, and promised to do that again and again, you would fight and we would stand with you. So why are you turning your backs against us? But look, there's no doubt that the last few years have been very effective for the anti-Israel movement in poisoning global public opinion against Israel. And it puts Israel in a precarious place where I think it understands you don't protect your own security just by being liked or by being sympathized with. You protect your security by being needed, by making yourself indispensable to the global economy and to other partners. Just look at the way the United States has been describing Israel during Operation Epic Fury. Both the Secretary of War and CENTCOM saying that the U.S. could not ask for a better teammate than Israel, that it was a breath of fresh air to fight with such a capable ally, that other allies should take note. The U.S. National Security Review calling Israel a model ally. Israel has established a reliance of the United States that understands how important Israel is to its national security. And it wants to do that for other countries as well. It doesn't want Canada to sympathize with us. It wants Canada to need us. And that's why Israel is at the cutting edge of developing the technologies of tomorrow, including defense tech. It's the world's 7th biggest exporter of defense technologies, out of an understanding that really in a world that has bowed so much to Qatari money in the last few years, what speaks is interests and not just perceptions. So I think there's an understanding that coming out of this war, we definitely have to do a better job of explaining ourselves to the world and helping our allies understand what it is, what it is that we are doing to defend ourselves, but also to continue to grow Israel economically and diplomatically to make sure that it becomes an indispensable partner for these nations. And you can't just throw it under the bus, even when the demographics are against us. And we look at what is happening in the UK. You look what is happening in Canada, rapidly growing Muslim communities that are traditionally hostile to Israel. And Israel sees the writing on the wall. It understands how the transformation of these countries is going to have ramifications for its foreign policy because of the growth of populations that are hostile to Israel and do not want to engage with it. And many of them will not recognize it at all.
Is there a natural ally in the United States? Does Israel get a friendly voice or face in the White House again? Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who should be a leading candidate, was just here in Toronto. I spoke to people who were in meetings with him. They said he's bright, he's sharp, he gets it, but he'll never get the nomination because he's Jewish. And if it's J.D. Vance, well, that's not a friend to Israel on the Republican side. So do they ever get a friend in the White House again?
Look, American politics has been going through such incredible polarization that it's almost amazing Israel managed to remain a bipartisan issue for so long, because nothing is bipartisan, maybe except for opposition to this Iran deal, with Republicans and Democrats alike saying that it is a bad deal. But Israelis look at the American map and they see who the likely candidates are. And if it's Josh Shapiro versus Marco Rubio, then the future of the America-Israel relationship is going to be safe. If it's J.D. Vance versus AOC, then God help us, because no one thinks that either of them is particularly friendly to Israel. AOC representing the radical left of the Democratic Party, and J.D. Vance increasingly sounding like Tucker Carlson, for example. One of the reasons that Netanyahu now is eager to end America's military aid to Israel and shift towards a model of partnership is an understanding that we don't know who the next president is going to be and whether there's going to be an option to renew that military aid as well. You have to end your dependence on the United States if the United States is no longer a firm, unshakable supporter, and this is subject to domestic politics. I think Canada's learning something very similar as well, having relied for a very long time, almost unthinkingly, on the stability and friendship of the United States, suddenly realizing that actually domestic politics there can very wildly shape Canada's relations with the United States. So in Israel, it's the same thing. There's an understanding that Israel will have to reduce its arms dependence on the United States. That will have many advantages. It allows Israeli industries to compete in a way that they couldn't when they were tied to American supply chains. But Israel will have to reduce its dependence on American arms because this whole issue has become very soured and very polarized within American politics.
Eylon, thanks so much as always. A quick break, and when we come back, an interview with a former Israeli defense intelligence officer who says this deal's bad, but it's the outcome of a war that was waged badly. Back in moments.
Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, oh yeah, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
This episode is brought to you by Starbucks.
That is fire. Whoa, that's good.
This might be the drink of the summer.
Okay, I like this one too. I'm rocking with it. Okay.
Try it for yourself. Starbucks Refreshers concentrates are coming home. Find them in the coffee aisle and make it yours.
Suffering from dry, tired, irritated eyes? Don't let dry eyes win. Use Systane Pro. It hydrates, restores, and protects dry eyes for up to 12 hours. Systane Pro. Triple action dry eye relief.
You're a political junkie, right? I mean, that's why you're listening to this podcast.
But if you're not in the loop with Postmedia's VIP political hack, then you're not getting even close to the whole politics story.
I'm Stuart Thompson, Parliamentary Bureau Chief.
And I'm political analyst Tasha Carradine.
We head up the team that brings Political Hack members the exclusive political intel that goes so much deeper than the news, with inside stories, sharp analysis, and behind-the-scenes scoops from Parliament Hill and beyond.
With our twice-weekly newsletters, exclusive reports from Washington, D.C., early access to John Ivison columns, and subscriber-only videos and events, Hack members get insider insight into the minds of the strategists, policy gurus, and power brokers shaping Canada's political future.
You don't want to miss all that, do you?
I sure don't. And you can get all now for less than $1 a week. Just go to nationalpost.com/newsletters to sign up.
That's nationalpost.com/newsletters.
So much is happening in politics right now. Rising tensions with the U.S. on trade and defense.
Not one, but two provincial separatist movements gaining real ground.
The Liberals trying to hang on to a razor-thin majority as the economy stumbles and with the cost of living still rising.
It's exciting.
Extremely exciting.
But the only way to get behind the scenes and right into the source code of what politicians and the people around them are really thinking is to get Political Hack.
Go to nationalpost.com/newsletters.
And join us.
If it weren't for the United States of America, with me, because Obama was the opposite, Israel would not exist right now. Israel would have been blown off the face of the earth, 100%. And every smart person in Israel knows that.
Donald Trump sending more messages to the Israeli government through the media. We've heard from the political side with Eylon Levy. Now, what about the security side and how this war was prosecuted, which ultimately led to this deal? Danny Citrinowicz served 25 years in a variety of command positions with the Israeli Defense Intelligence Unit, including head of the Iran branch, doing research and analysis. We've heard critics call this deal with Iran a surrender by the Americans, a betrayal of Israel, a deal that actually makes Iran stronger. But you said this is a return to reality over wishful thinking. What do you mean by that? And are those other assessments that America failed, lost, or has been humiliated by Iran, are those assessments incorrect in your view?
Well, I think that eventually this deal is straight connection to the results of the war. And in the war, Iran managed to overcome Israel and the U.S. The regime has not been toppled, and also controlling the artery of the international economy. So in that regard, I don't think that the U.S. did have ever had some sort of another opportunity or options to do the opposite. So the deal is the only option that they had. Now, again, U.S. and Israel failed in the war. They had operational achievements, but eventually they didn't topple the regime. And the regime still had the ability to hit Israel, the U.S. presence in the region, and of course the Gulf states. So in that regard, the deal is really a reflection of results of the war. Now, I really think that even before the war, the expectations were exaggerated in a way that everything related to the ballistic missile and proxies. And I think you had to have a war to return back to basic, at least from the U.S. side, the understanding that you have to be realistic in what you demand. And I think this is actually what happened after the war. So, yes, from this kind of a loss, definitely a strategic loss to the U.S. and Israel, came a deal that actually reflects that, a deal that's strengthening the regime.
It is part of the problem with the war that the objectives weren't necessarily clear for all those involved. Regime change, you mentioned that. That was clearly a desire of the Netanyahu administration in Israel. It was less clear that that was a desire for the Trump administration. They would vacillate on that. They'd go back and forth. Is that part of the problem with how the war was prosecuted. They knew they wanted to hit Iran hard, but did they have clear enough objectives?
Well, I think that both sides on the 20th of February thought the same thing, meaning that Israel, for the first time in history, killed a foreign leader not to have a good nuclear deal, that the Iranians would dilute the nuclear material. We went to top of the regime, and also from the U.S. side, it was obvious. You can say whatever you want in that perspective, but everybody knew. Just return back to what Trump said the day of the war. It will be yours to take. Lay down your arms. Definitely, it's not. The purpose was not to reach a good nuclear deal. After 3-4 days, I think Trump understood that it's not going anywhere in that regard. But I think the bigger mistake is the war itself. It's not only the targets. I think that the war was hubris, especially by Israel.
What do you mean by that?
But we really thought that after 7th of October, with all our achievements, especially after the 12-day war, that we're able to change the regime for the good. We're able to change the direction of the Islamic Republic by utilizing their weakness, definitely after demonstrations in Iran. And I think we underestimated their resilience, overestimated our firepower. And this is where we got. And I think for Israel, it's much worse than the U.S. Because for Israel, it's really the collapse of those strategy that led Netanyahu regarding Iran. So this war was a problem for the beginning with. And after that, the purposes of the war were bad. And again, we are, at the end of the day, we are paying the price for the flawed preparation that we had.
In terms of damage done to the regime, the Americans are saying, look, we inflicted a lot of pain, we inflicted a lot of damage. I'm sure, if I looked, I'd find Prime Minister Netanyahu saying the same thing. Others are saying, no, the regime's shown that they can stick around. They're stronger. The IRGC is stronger. What's your assessment? How much damage was done to the regime? And, even if they lost a lot of military assets, do they have a victory in terms of being able to come out of this saying, we faced down the great Satan and we're still here?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Operationally, definitely there were significant achievements. I have to say that. Definitely in terms of decapitating the senior leadership and, of course, damaging the force buildup of Iran. Israel and definitely the U.S. made significant ground in depriving the Iranian capabilities to manufacture missiles. Now, they returned back to it, but definitely that caused a major damage, and also the economical damage that Israel created by attacking the petrochemical power plants and others. I think this is definitely caused mounting problems for Iran, especially on the economical side. And we have to remember that Iran entered this war in a very bad economical situation. So definitely we had achievements by attacking them every day and every night. I'm not underestimating that. The problem is it's not accumulating in a strategic effect, meaning that despite everything that we did, despite all the hundreds of missiles or thousands of missiles being thrown against Iran, at the end of the day, they managed to overcome. Because they have underground capabilities, so they preserve the ability to launch missiles on Israel, on the Gulf states. And the leadership survived and managed to overcome the death of the capitulation of the Khamenei. So definitely there were operational achievements. The problem is, of course, that didn't accumulate to the strategic effect that we wanted, meaning toppling the regime. And once you're putting that as your main purpose, definitely, despite everything that you did, you actually failed in the war.
At the beginning of the war, there was no light between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. You definitely can't say that now. We've seen some of it break out in the open, and while some are saying, no, the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu is still good, clearly that's not the case. What's your assessment on this? How has this war changed the relationship between Washington and Jerusalem or Tel Aviv? And is it long-term, this change?
Well, definitely until the war, the relationship were very good. I think Netanyahu actually was highly dependent on Trump because he's actually the last, I think, foreign leader that he can actually speak to. And definitely when he's the U.S. president, it has a lot of benefit from the U.S. side and also from the Israeli side. And also Netanyahu depending on Trump personally because of everything related to the pardon discussion regarding his trial. But the problem is for Netanyahu is that he forgot one thing. Trump likes quick wins. He doesn't like prolonged wins. He likes to have winners and not losers. And what happened in the war that Prime Minister Netanyahu offered him a half-baked plan. Probably Netanyahu thought, yeah, it's not complete, but maybe, we'll start the war and everything will be good. At the end of the day, we failed. Hormuz Straits was something that Trump couldn't let go, had to reach an agreement. And that put Netanyahu in a very problematic situation where he perceived in Washington as someone that's trying to prevent the deal from happening by allowing Israel to strike in Lebanon. But even worse than that, not only in the administration, in the Congress, Israel has mounting problem in terms of how it's perceived in the U.S. public and the U.S. policymakers. So we have a major problem when now the U.S. president actually changed his views regarding Netanyahu. And I'm not saying that he's not going to support Netanyahu, but the problem for Netanyahu is that if Netanyahu will continue doing things that will be perceived in Washington as trying to undermine the agreement, then I think that Trump will be very angry and will take actions against Israel. So now I don't think that there is alignment between them.
How much does this change Netanyahu's support within Israeli society?
Well, Netanyahu has multiple problems over here. Now, I have to say something about that, a caveat. Most of the people that will vote Netanyahu don't think it will matter for them what happened in Iran. But Netanyahu thought that he can utilize everything happening in Iran to win mandates, and I think that we have a very close race. But now it's actually the opposite. He's been attacked from the left because of the failure, and from the right, from his ability to counter or not to counter the U.S. president regarding Lebanon. Now, I don't think it will change much in terms of the election if Netanyahu will decide to run, but I think that definitely cannot enjoy that win. On the contrary, and as someone that perceived that Mr. Iran in Israel, it will be very hard to overcome, especially when people in Israel understand the failure. So I definitely cannot utilize that. He cannot use that for its own good. Whether it's going to influence that in a bad way, probably, but I don't think it will be. I think it will be on the margins. If you will vote Netanyahu, you couldn't care less about that. But then we have to wait and see what will happen in the next couple of months.
In terms of broader Israeli society, some I've spoken to say, well, Israelis feel betrayed by Donald Trump. There was a lot of love for Trump before. Now it's a sense of betrayal. In your view, is that a widespread viewpoint?
Well, it depends. If you are support Netanyahu, you'll be against Trump. And if against Netanyahu, will be against Netanyahu, not against Trump. I think you have to remember one thing. President Trump is a president of the United States of America. It's not a president of Israel. It's what some people in Israel thought. He think the U.S. interest, not the Israeli interest. Sometimes they are aligned, sometimes they're not aligned. Israel couldn't care less about the Hormuz Straits. But for Trump, it was everything, and people in Israel don't understand that. So I think, I thought highly of Trump, releasing the hostages, but I knew from the beginning, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, he will choose the American interest, and that's because he's the U.S. president. In Israel, people find it very hard to believe that, because when you're being pushed all the time, Netanyahu pushed Trump, let's get an Israeli prize for him, and let's give him this and that. So really, people thought that he's synonymous with everything that Netanyahu will say. And now they're surprised. Why you are surprised when definitely will do what's good for the U.S., and even if it's not aligned with Israel, so be it for him.
Let's talk about the actual deal. Supporters of the Trump deal say there are checks and balances in the deal that put limits on Tehran. There's been a lot of discussion around the $300 billion and the funds and who controls that. You say your main concern is around the controls on the nuclear program. Iran has proven itself untrustworthy on this issue in the past. How many times have they lied to or evaded inspections? So how do you construct a nuclear oversight program that the rest of the world can have confidence in?
That's a very good question. I think first we have to say it's a bad deal. It's not a good deal. It's a bad deal because Iran is giving very little and get a lot, especially in waivers regarding selling oil and the unfreezing of their assets. And it's a bad deal, but it was the only possible way for the U.S. to end the war. So it was a bad deal. It is a bad deal, but it's the only path to move forward. So it is what it is. No discussion on the ballistic missiles, no discussion on proxies. I knew it's not realistic from the beginning with, but in Israel, people thought that maybe Trump will insist on that. Obviously, it will not. Now, the nuclear is a major thing because the only way for Iran to threaten on an existential level Israel and the Gulf states is the nuclear. So we have to be very active in thinking how we can block the path of Iran to a bomb. Now, my concern is that, Witkoff and Kushner had already said They're not really the expert in that regard. And the Iranians are masters in finding loopholes in any agreement. So I think the most important thing going into negotiations is to have a team of experts that really will close everything. Because as you said, we cannot trust the Iranians in nothing. Yes, I have to say one thing about the IAEA inspector regime. It's a robust, important. When it was in Iran, it was very effective. But we cannot trust the Iranians. This is why we have to build this kind of robust and effective inspection regime that will prevent Iranians to move forward, because we have to admit that they move forward a lot after Trump decided to leave the JCPOA. So I'm not trusting anyone and any one of them, but I do believe they can rebuild some sort of a good and robust inspection regime while you have the IAEA involved and other experts that will block any path of Iran to move into a bomb.
Longer term, you've written that the path to regional stabilization, essentially peace, runs through Ramallah, not Tehran. What do you mean by that?
Well, in Israel, especially another failure, I think, by Netanyahu, and not only Netanyahu, but Netanyahu, is just the way of thinking that we'll focus on Iran, and then it will allow us to move toward normalization with Saudi Arabia. I think this war proved again and again that this strategy is a flawed strategy that built on untrustworthy statements coming from people that do not understand the Middle East. The only way that the Saudis will move forward on normalization with Israel will be a real advancement that Israel will do on the Palestinian route. Now, I have to emphasize one other thing regarding that. I think maybe from the failure of this war, maybe people will understand that in Israel, but especially in the U.S., that the only way to move that is not through Iran and hitting Iran, because that won't change anything. On the contrary, Israel perceived by the Gulf states as an undermined element within the region. But moving forward on the Palestinian issue, I think it's good for us, preventing a one-state reality, but also will allow us to move forward. And there's not going to be any normalization with the Saudis that will open the way for Israel to normalization with all of the Sunni world, unless Israel will do something concrete and substantial with the Palestinians. Israel government, they don't want to do that. They want to focus on Iran. Iran is easier. It's one everybody hates. But in the end of the day, they will have to return back to the drawing board and focus on the Palestinian issue. Otherwise, you won't see any agreement. And I'm hoping for the Washington side that they will insist on that, influence that, because otherwise we'll have a continuation of the current situation that we have right now.
Danny, thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Full Comment is a post-media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Proulx. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Make sure that you hit subscribe. Follow us on social media. Do what you can to share this around and let your friends know about us. Until next time, thanks for listening. I'm Brian Lilly.
You're a political junkie, right? I mean, that's why you're listening to this podcast.
But if you're not in the loop with Postmedia's VIP political hack, then you're not getting even close to the whole politics story.
I'm Stuart Thompson, Parliamentary Bureau Chief.
And I'm political analyst Tasha Karadan.
We head up the team that brings Political Hack members the exclusive political intel that goes so much deeper than the news, with inside stories, sharp analysis, and behind-the-scenes scoops from Parliament Hill and beyond.
With our twice-weekly newsletters, exclusive reports from Washington, D.C., early access to John Iveson columns, and subscriber-only videos and events, Hack members get insider insight into the minds of the strategists, policy gurus, and power brokers shaping Canada's political future.
You don't want to miss all that, do you?
I sure don't. And you can get all now for less than $1 a week. Just go to nationalpost.com/newsletters to sign up.
That's nationalpost.com/newsletters.
So much is happening in politics right now. Rising tensions with the U.S. on trade and defense.
Not one, but two provincial separatist movements gaining real ground.
The Liberals trying to hang on to a razor-thin majority as the economy stumbles and with the cost of living still rising.
It's exciting.
Extremely exciting.
But the only way to get behind the scenes and right into the source code of what politicians and the people around them are really thinking is to get Political Hack.
Go to nationalpost.com/newsletters.
And join us.